If geofences are a way of engaging outside of the building and attracting attention, beacons are a great way of then engaging inside of the building and inspiring action. You can put them over your competitor location. You can't exactly do that with beacons. Wi-Fi is very important for doing what we call passive geofencing, which is still very accurate but doesn't rely on a lot of battery power, but it does mean the user has to have Wi-Fi on. So by using geofencing, we could delay sending the communication, the survey, by a certain amount of time and ask them, how do we do today? Maybe also provide an incentive for completing the survey. But yeah, geofences can go up to the entire countries or cities. So it can be very easy to use geofencing as a segmentation strategy.
You're listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ecosystem with Steve Statler.
Welcome to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ecosystem, the podcast for solution designers and location-aware entrepreneurs. My name's Steve Statler, and this week we're off to Dublin, and I am speaking to Patrick Leddy, who is the CEO of Pulsate. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Steve, for the introduction, and thank you for everyone for tuning in to hear some of the things that we're going to be talking about today around the area of geofencing.
Yes, indeed. So this is a little bit of a mashup between your own incredibly well-produced productions, the Pulsate Academy and the Mobile Monk. So great to see that whiteboard behind you, and it's appropriate because we're going to be doing, I wouldn't say it's geofencing 101, I'd say it's more 201, the kind of let's drill down and let's look into this in some detail. And you were kind enough to contribute to our book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ecosystem, which is this kind of encyclopedia of everything that solution designers need to know in the proximity and location space. And you did an amazing job. And I was actually rereading your chapter. And so what I decided to do was just kind of prompt you to talk around some of the things that you raised in that, because I think most people feel like they understand what geofencing is, but we're going to go in and talk about some of the nuances. But let's start off and tell us, what is a geofence?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. And thanks for the introduction again. I did have a skim over the chapter again this morning just to refresh myself. And then I guess look over some of the other content we've been producing around location-based marketing and geofencing to make sure I have all of the latest facts and figures and everything up to date and to discuss today. So a geofence essentially is a virtual perimeter. It doesn't require any hardware to be deployed, so you don't really need anything like a beacon. You can put a geofence pretty much anywhere you want. Usually you plot them in some kind of a marketing tool on a Google map. You have a latitude and longitude of where you're placing the geofence in some kind of radius of accuracy. So a lot of geofencing is circular based regions. They tend to be, where beacons are targeting a very granular area and sometimes indoors. Geofences tend to be a little bit larger in the catchment area in terms of what they would target. And of course, they have the benefit of not needing to deploy any hardware. They're a completely virtual concept. Your mobile phone can then monitor in various ways that I guess you're going to be asking me about a little bit later. Can monitor for your proximity to these fences and then detect when you've reached one. And then when you have, I guess we can do some interesting things, like we can record when you were there, that you are there now, and we could just store that and we could do something with that later. Or perhaps we could do some kind of interesting marketing, some follow-on interaction right after you step into that fence.
Very good. Well, you touched on a whole bunch of stuff. Let's peel some of those things back individually, sure. And we'll talk about the use cases because there's lots. And you had some great suggestions in the book. So, but let's just look at the strengths and weaknesses. And you touched on one, which is no hardware required, which back in my Gimbal days when Gimbal was part of Qualcomm, I was part of Qualcomm, I remember we were kind of looking at, we needed to make money. We needed to make money fast. And how are we going to we've got fantastic beacons, but it takes a while to get those beacons out there. So it seems like geofencing just allows you to fast forward in some use cases at least. What are your thoughts on the strengths and weaknesses?
Okay, yeah, sure. It's a great question. So I think beacons and geofences can be used for very different types of deployments. I generally think if you're going to use them together, think of geofences as kind of like outside the building as a tool to kind of attract people to your location, increase your footfall. If geofences are a way of engaging outside of the building and attracting attention, beacons are a great way of then engaging inside of the building and inspiring action. So attracting that attention outdoors to create that awareness, whether it's brand awareness or a direct response, we want to get people to do something, maybe it's to visit us. Then when they visit the location, we combine their proximity or their presence. We could combine that with some CRM data so we know something about them, some contextualization, and then we might know their proximity as well through a beacon. So then we can offer up the most relevant product information in the store based on who and the products that they are near. But we initially use the geofencing technologies at a macro level to attract attention, and then the beacons at a micro level or a proximity level to inspire that action once they came into the store. So some of the pros of geofencing, as I've already mentioned, they're virtual, you can place them anywhere. They're very inexpensive, naturally, since they are a virtual concept. You're not going to be deploying any hardware, there's no costs to that. There are battery costs, and I'm guessing we'll touch upon that later. So they're very easy to set up. You can put them over your competitor locations. You can't exactly do that with beacons because that's kind of like you're sneaking into your competitor's location and bugging them out with beacons. That's not going to go down too well. But you can do that with geofences because they are totally virtual. Beacons, I guess just to discuss the cons of geofences as well, firstly, before I go into beacons. They are, a wider location. They're more macro. So, down to usually geofences, you'd say like kind of like 100 meters is the minimum size in terms of accuracy. Some of the work that we've done in Pulsate over the last year has seen that shrink right down to maybe 20 meters of accuracy and the ability to draw polygons. But generally, geofencing is kind of like for targeting larger areas. It also only works typically if you have Wi-Fi turned on the device. There are some geofencing SDKs that run purely with GPS, meaning you don't have to have Wi-Fi on, but then you see like a battery trade-off there. So I think Wi-Fi is very important for doing what we call passive geofencing, which is still very accurate, but doesn't rely on a lot of battery power, but it does mean the user has to have Wi-Fi on. So that's kind of one of the negatives of geofencing, and the fact that you can't be like super granular down to 5 meters of accuracy with geofencing. That just won't work. And that leads us on kind of nicely to beacons. So beacons, in terms of some of their advantages, they can go down to a very granular level of proximity and understanding where customers are, all the way down to maybe a meter and right down to a tap. So you can do indoor positioning with them and understand the proximities of customers relative to products, floors, and sections of that store or of that location. And also you can, with a high degree of certainty, the customer is there. Sometimes geofencing can throw these, GPS quirks or a cell tower weirdness, and you have to kind of compensate for that. So beacons can be a little bit more reliable at times. Some of the drawbacks, of course, are that you need this physical hardware. It is battery operated. You have to physically go out and put the beacons up. It is a little bit of an art and a science. You have to understand about certain materials you're putting the beacons near. You have to be aware that batteries can drain in the devices. You have to go out and upgrade the beacons. People can steal your beacons as well. So there are some physical drawbacks naturally to the hardware.
But pretty complementary, and I look at successful location apps like Shopkick, and they clearly use both. They put the geofence around the shopping mall, remind you that you could go in, and then they verify you've actually entered the store that's paying for that reminder with a beacon. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. In your chapter, you had some really interesting use cases and some, as is your way, some tantalizing ways of describing them. And the first one, kind of fairly straightforward, but just tell us what you had in mind when you talked about the promote, incentivize, and reward use case.
Sure. So to promote, incentivize, and reward. So I guess what I was talking about there is geofencing can be used initially to attract attention and then to reach out to customers and provide them with some kind of a benefit. As I said before, they really are an excellent way of reminding customers about a promotion while they've shown up for you in the physical world, while they're there. Previously, we may have just sent a push notification, like we would have done this earlier in the week, and their context, maybe we didn't understand that context or we didn't know about it. So they were like at home on the couch, or they're watching TV, or they're in work, whatever they're doing, and suddenly they get this like notification for an offer or a coupon or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, that's kind of vaguely interesting, and then they like poof, like they instantly forget, and they're probably not going to remember the next time they go near your store. Now suddenly, when we introduce geofencing to the equation, we're able to do that marketing interaction. We're able to promote what it is that we have to sell. We can incentivize them to take action at the right time and reward them when they've shown them for us in physical locations.
I'm going to cut you off because we've just got so much to get through. Because I want you to talk about stamp out promiscuity. Do you remember what you were talking about when you said use geofences to stamp out promiscuity?
Are you sure this wasn't a different book? I'm joking. Yes, no, I did write that. So I guess what I meant by promiscuity is, yes, well, I said before that beacons, you can't bug out your competitors with beacons, right? Because that would be illegal. But geofences, being virtual, it's just like the airspace above their business. You can place beacons in those locations. So that means that you can basically tag competitor locations and understand when customers visit those locations. So out of your CRM base of customers that are loyal, or at least that you think are loyal, you might be able to get some competitive intel on which customers are also frequenting these locations. And armed and dangerous with that information, you may not want to give them that virtual tap on the shoulder while they're there. That might be a little bit freaky. You might want to do this next time they're in your location, but having known they were at the competitor's location. You might want to make them a more tantalizing offer. You might want to show them a little bit more love than you previously have to try and put them on a corrective path that leads them back to profitability and a better pattern within your own company.
I mean, it's an amazing opportunity. You have, a lot of like telcos that are obsessed by churn, but retailers now have a chance to measure how, if you're a supermarket, what times is my customer going to my supermarket versus another supermarket? That's just, and then you can play with ways of getting more of their shopping basket. We're going to do this as kind of like fairly quick ones. People can always buy the book if they want to get the details. But you had some provocative use case titles. Spiking feelings of accomplishment, I thought was a good one. What's that?
Great, yeah, and I've got a separate video on this on the Pulsate Academy, which talks about the new loyal and how a lot of loyalty programs basically equate with customer bribery programs, and we're just creating functional and rational loyalty. And if we want to become brands that generate an emotional connection with customers and engage that side of the brain, what's it called? The limbic side of the brain. We want to do things like spike feelings of accomplishment. So let me give you an example. So if we have like a check-in feature within our app, which is essentially enabling customers to tell their social media following that they're in XYZ company's locations, well, then what we could do is basically remind them that this function is here upon arrival, and we would do this with a push notification that equates to that kind of like virtual tap on the shoulder. So that will equate with some kind of an Easter egg that they would unlock on the inside of the app, and then we allow them to actually convey this social status as a virtual currency. So when I say spiking the feelings of accomplishment, we're helping them actually convey their status, which means that when they show up for us in the physical location, we give them that nudge that says, "Hey Steve, why don't you check in the app?" And then when they perform their 5th check-in, we make a big deal out of it. We say, "Hurrah, congratulations, you just," kind of like the way Foursquare used to do it, you could become the mayor with so many check-ins. You may want to unlock something in the app after they've done something a number of times, but don't play it down. You want to make like a really big deal out of it and make them feel like they've really accomplished something. And because it's happened in your own brand experience, that feeling of accomplishment that you've generated, that is worth a hell of a lot more than the loyalty points towards the limbic side of the brain and forging that engagement. And then if you help them, if you want to like double down on that, if you help them convey that feeling of accomplishment or that status that they've reached in the app, if you help them convey that to others on social networks, that is another thing that will go towards building emotional loyalty.
Love it. What was ask how they feel?
Ask how they feel. Okay, so I guess I'm talking about surveying here as well. Yeah. So a great place to ask customers, what did you think about our product or company, is not at some random interval, who would have thought. Yeah. It actually is when they've just experienced your product or your service. So, I'll give you an example. You're flying with a particular airline, you land at your destination, you disembark, you get your bag, and you're leaving the airport. Now would be a great time to actually ask me, how was my flight that day? Did it arrive on time? What did I think? Were people friendly? Did I get the service that I expected? So by using geofencing, we could delay sending the communication, the survey, by a certain amount of time and ask them, how do we do today? Maybe also provide an incentive for completing the survey. And we want to keep this very short because we're on mobile devices. It could be a thumbs up, a thumbs down. It could be free emojis that I pick from. We've done some of that in Pulsate with some new stuff we have coming out. But don't make me fill out this tedious form that feels like torture. So I guess that's what I meant by ask them how they feel. Do it with a geofence. It's
very good.
It's contextual.
Straight on, no time to pause. Regional campaigns. What were you talking about with regional campaigns? Here's what I had in my mind, sure. And maybe I need to go back and read our book as well. So I remember when we were doing the Super Bowl, a large event over here in the States, and we had beacons all around the Super Bowl stadium, MetLife Stadium, and we wanted to drive people into the stadium, but we didn't want to annoy people in California because MetLife is on the East Coast. So we basically kind of drew a region around, I think it was New York, New Jersey, and basically focused a whole bunch of our campaigns around that. And we used geofencing to do it.
That's very cool. Yeah. So I think, a lot of the geofencing use cases we've just talked about, the defenses are quite small, like they're around a specific building or something. But geofences can go up to the entire countries or cities. So it can be very easy to use geofencing as a segmentation strategy for what campaigns go to whom. I think it's very effective. We kind of look at them more as region targeting instead of geofencing. Mm-hmm. And we kind of take in the last location that someone used your app in. And that's something that we allow people to kind of filter on as where they last used the app, as opposed to, I think you can kind of segment that down to area codes as opposed to an actual perimeter that people have to hit.
Very good. And then the last one that we had in the list was remind them to turn on Bluetooth.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that one. Okay, so if you track the Bluetooth state, which you can do, you can request access for that on iOS and Android to know whether Bluetooth is on or off. What you want to do is when someone has breached a geofence, usually you get 20 seconds in the background to wake up and do your thing. One of those things that you do could be to check the Bluetooth state. So if you have determined the Bluetooth state to be off, well, then you can pull that back into your segmentation and your marketing automation. And then you could say, don't forget, turn on your Bluetooth. And why? Create a little bit of fear of loss here. To be within a chance of getting top offers based on your location and treats and virtual Easter eggs and make them feel like there's something of value because we all are usually operating from a selfish standpoint of what they can get out of the interaction. So yes, by understanding the Bluetooth state, when they hit the fence, if the department store is full of Bluetooth beacons and their Bluetooth's off, they're really going to miss out on what could be an incredible in-store experience. So it's just giving them that little nice nudge or tap on the shoulder to say, hey, why don't you flip on your Bluetooth? You could be missing out. So that's an interesting use case.
I love the way you think of these things in very psychological terms. Is this just kind of, for Pulsate, do you spend a lot of time talking to users, or are you kind of doing the Apple thing where reputedly Steve Jobs never had focus groups? He just kind of demanded that people think about the user. What's your approach?
Absolutely. So we use a technique called jobs to be done. And I'm kind of with Steve Jobs on this one. If you bring people into a room and ask them what they want, they'll give you the wrong answers. A great example of what jobs to be done is the milkshake. A fast food chain brought all of the people that fitted into the profile of milkshake drinkers into a panel. And they said, do you want your milkshakes chewier, sweeter, more viscosity to the milkshake, whatever it might be. They improved the product along the list of attributes that were given, and it had absolutely zero impact on sales. Because customers, when asked directly what they want, they can't really tell you what they want. But when you interview them and you try to figure out what, where they were coming from when they researched a particular solution, or why did they download that app, or why did they do business with that company, and when you figure out the switching behavior, like what made them switch from DAS to personal washing powder. When you figure out the switching, that's the key in understanding why they switched. And you can, through these interview process of jobs to be done, you can kind of reverse engineer the outcome the customer has in mind or the job they're looking to get done. So you can do it in this special interview format. And we do that with a number of consumers to try and understand the ways they want to be engaged with. But when you flat out ask them, they give you all this junk. They just don't know. They kind of give you what you think what you want to hear. They're going to give you all these attributes, and it's usually nonsense. So you have to be very careful how you take in this information, how you conduct your research. So jobs to be done. Check out on YouTube, the milkshake plus jobs to be done. It's interesting.
That's very good. Well, I am going to do, in the spirit of making this interesting, I'm going to be spontaneous, and I'm going to stop the interview now, because I think you have done an amazing job. We talked about what is a geofence, strengths and weaknesses, how beacons fit in, and then a bunch of great use cases. And I'm guessing that people watching are just exhausted and they need to have a milkshake or have some coffee or something. So let's pause now and then, come back next episode and talk about all the other stuff that we were going to talk about, and there's a lot. There's passive and active geofencing. What's the difference between Android and iOS, and what people should look for when they're selecting the geofencing technology. So we talked about why you should use it, what you can use it for. And now the next session, I suggest we talk about how you do it. Sound okay?
Absolutely. Sounds good, Steve. I'll see you in the next episode.
All right. So Patrick, I've been, you come from the land of U2. I gotta hear what are the 3 songs that you would take with you to Mars?
That's a great question. Okay, so I am a massive Daft Punk fan. Since we're talking about geofencing, I'm going to go with Around the World. It also reminds me of exploring the world, I guess, and experiencing new cultures and journeys and meeting new people, and that's something that I really enjoy, that really lights me up. And also, you can put geofences anywhere around the world, or a virtual perimeter, as we've already discussed. Since you brought up U2, they probably wouldn't be my favourite band, but out of all their stuff, I'd say their song, it goes like, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. I'm not sure if that's the actual title. It could be.
Yeah, I know the one. Yeah. So okay. Well, you don't have to choose them. I just like them, and I always think of them when I go to Dublin. But
the power of suggestion. I like that song mainly because you can find happiness in other people, but you'll never be complete if you don't actually love what you do innately. And I think that's probably the message that they have in that song. Thirdly, Space Oddity, I think, by David Bowie. Make your mark in the world, stand out from the normal crowd, and be something new, be something different.
Well, and he had this amazing ability to be incredibly unique and distinctive, whilst at the same time really listening to the zeitgeist. And you follow his career, and it's incredibly varied. It's not just kind of Metallica 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure they have developed, but from my outside, they haven't.
Absolutely. So they would be my top 3.
Love it. Thanks very much.
I'm stepping through the door.